Let's talk to Brendan O'Neill, editor of Spiked Online. Brendan, I hope you were out celebrating a little bit of minimal back of our freedom yesterday. Were you out in the pub?
Absolutely.
Good
It
man.
was freezing where I was, but I had to get out there. A tiny bit of freedom has come back, and I was incredibly excited.
Very happy to get it. Well, I'll tell you what you're not going to be free to do from now on, though, is use a lot of words in Scrabble that were previously allowed. Mattel, which owns the rights to the Scrabble game outside North America, so including here in the UK, has been accused of pandering to wokedom by removing from their official lists of allowed Scrabble terms, and anyone who plays competitively at home will know about this, 400 separate, apparently derogatory terms that it believes have no place whatsoever in the family game. Now, some of these are words which, frankly, we can't remotely say out loud on the show, wouldn't want to say out loud on the show, but why would they need to be banned from a game? They're either words that have a meaning and are in a dictionary, whether they're horrible, nasty words or not, or they're not words, they're made up words. How on earth can Scrabble decide whether or not a word is acceptable when it's a word that exists?
That's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, this is the unstoppable march of wokeness. It is just sucking up every institution and now every board game. It's really crazy. And you're asking exactly the right question. These are real words. Some of them are really derogatory words. There are racist terms. There are homophobic terms. Everyone recognizes that those are words you should not use in polite society, and you should certainly not use them against other people. But the point of Scrabble is that you're just using a word that is in a dictionary. You're not wielding it as a weapon. It's just a question of whether it's a real word or not. So this is the myopic policing of language, which has now reached the level of policing what you can say on a Scrabble board, between you and a couple of friends. Yeah. What words you can use from the dictionary. This is the level of speech policing and thought policing we've reached. And I think Mattel has behaved ridiculously on this.
But it's this idea that not only these words are unacceptable, again, we can't say any of these words on the radio. I don't want these people to have to hear these words on the radio. But if someone chooses to use that word in a Scrabble game, I mean, let's face it, people often play like rude versions of these games where you can put some horrible words down. There are words that I would perhaps use if I was playing with adults, which I wouldn't use if I was playing with children, for instance. I mean, we all make judgments. But the idea that if these words are not acceptable in this game, somehow they magically disappear, and the horrible thought processes behind them disappear as well, and magically all of the hatred in the world is gone because the Scrabble official dictionary doesn't include them. I mean, this is nonsense stuff.
That's the stupidity of censorship, the idea that you can solve social problems and problems of hatred and prejudice by censoring words. That's just not how it works. And, the logical conclusion to this is to remove those words from the dictionary, just erase them, throw them down the memory hole, don't have any record of them whatsoever. That would be really ridiculous because these are actual words. And also, as you say, it would do nothing whatsoever to solve the problems of hatred that do exist in parts of society.
Indeed. I also must ask you about the BBC that has admitted 111,000 people have made complaints to the broadcaster over their blanket coverage of the Duke of Edinburgh's death on Friday. It's the most complained about event in British television. Some of the complaints apparently were complaints about how easy it was to complain about the BBC coverage. Now, understandable, a death of a 99-year-old consort to the Queen, someone who's played a very big role in our sort of background of everyone's lives for last goodness knows how many decades. It's understandable there would be, blanket wall coverage on the news stations, but the decision of the BBC to make it BBC One and BBC Two shut down BBC Four and on the BBC News channel meant there were no other options available to anyone, and there's been a lot of anger about that.
Yeah, it was a bit much. I mean, it was wall to wall. There was no escaping it. Like you, I'm a Republican, but at the same time, I recognise that, of course, the death of the Queen's consort was going to be a huge news event and will continue to be right through to the funeral. But it was slightly over the top. I'm a tiny bit torn on this because on the one hand, I want to say to the BBC, get a grip, give us some other things to watch. But on the other hand, I want to say to the armies of complainers,
yes.
Listen, you live in a constitutional monarchy. I mean, what did you expect? If you really want to transform things, then you should campaign for a democratic republic with an elected head of state rather than just throwing all these complaints at the BBC.
But that's it. I mean, I'm just not really a big fan of people complaining about these things. They're sort of, for goodness sake, turn over. But there wasn't much to turn over to for many people. But there is an element where, well, you know what, if we're paying for the BBC, people have got a right to say when they don't like the footage of the BBC. But I think the main thing here was that it was just the BBC so often making misjudgments when it comes to things like the last night of the proms and and getting rid of Rule Britannia until there was an outcry. They completely make these misjudgments. They're always sort of looking at what should we be doing? They don't feel it in their bones. They're not understanding that lots of people would want to see a lot of coverage of that sad death, and they would like to see maybe a documentary or two, but they wouldn't necessarily want 24 hours wall to wall. And this is where they just don't have the feel of the nation.
Absolutely right. And I think they might have been overcompensating for the fact that they have lost their direction over the past couple of years. They do seem out of touch with British sentiment, and they thought they could connect with it through the Philip thing, but they got that wrong as well. So the BBC needs to have a word with itself, sort out its priorities, keep in touch with the nation, but don't go overboard on things like this.
But I've got to love the people who complain about the complaints. This is so British.